Question 87. The shift in liberalism from negative liberalism to positive liberalism, and the Indian Constitution as a liberal constitution. Introduction. The evolution of liberalism. Liberalism is one of the most enduring political philosophies in modern political thought, emphasizing freedom, individual rights, equality, and constitutionalism. It originated in the 17th and 18th centuries as a reaction against feudalism, monarchy, and religious authoritarianism, championing the cause of the individual against the state. However, as society changed, particularly during the industrial and post-industrial eras, the meaning and purpose of liberty also evolved. Liberalism thus shifted from its early negative form, which emphasized freedom from state interference, to positive liberalism, which emphasizes freedom through state action and social responsibility. This transformation represents not a rejection of liberty, but its redefinition in light of social realities, moving from the ideal of the self-sufficient individual to that of the socially responsible citizen. The shift from negative to positive liberalism. 1. Negative liberalism, the early phase. Meaning and essence. Negative liberalism, or classical liberalism, emerged during the 17th, 19th centuries, championed by thinkers like John Locke, Adam Smith, J.S. Mill, early writings, and Herbert Spencer. It was called negative because it defined liberty negatively, as the absence of restraint or non-interference by the state. To be free meant to be left alone, to act as one pleases without external control, especially from government. 2. Historical context. Negative liberalism arose during a time when absolute monarchies and church control restricted individual life. Hence, its primary aim was to limit state power and protect individual rights, life, liberty, and property. Locke argued that the state should exist only to protect natural rights, not to regulate moral or economic life. Adam Smith extended this to economics through laissez-faire, the idea that the state should not interfere in markets, as free competition ensures prosperity. 3. Role of the state. The state was seen as a necessary evil. Its role was to maintain law, order, and defense, not to engage in welfare or economic regulation. In the words of Herbert Spencer, the government is best which governs least. 4. Features of negative liberalism. 1. Individualism. The individual is autonomous and prior to society. 2. Minimal state. State intervention should be restricted to protection of rights. 3. Economic freedom. Free markets and private property are sacred. 4. Political freedom, rule of law, representative government, and civil liberties. 5. Utilitarianism. Government exists for the greatest happiness of individuals. Example. The Industrial Revolution embodied negative liberalism. The state allowed unrestricted economic competition. However, this resulted in social inequality, child labor, and exploitation, exposing the limits of mere non-interference. 2. The crisis of negative liberalism. By the late 19th century, classical liberalism came under criticism for ignoring social and economic inequalities. Freedom in theory did not mean freedom in reality when large sections of society lacked education, health, or basic necessities. Example. The poor worker was legally free to sell his labor, but practically forced to accept starvation wages. Thus, freedom became a privilege of the rich, not a universal right. This contradiction led to a transformation of liberal thought from freedom from negative liberty to freedom to positive liberty. 3. Positive liberalism, the modern phase. High meaning and essence. Positive liberalism, or modern liberalism, redefines freedom as the ability to realize one's full potential through social and economic opportunities. It recognizes that true liberty requires not merely absence of restraint but the presence of enabling conditions, education, health, security, and equality. Thus, freedom is no longer just a right but also a capacity. Positive liberty asks not only what am I free from but what am I free to become. 2. Role of the state in positive liberalism. The state is not a necessary evil but a positive agent of welfare and justice. It must remove social and economic obstacles that prevent individuals from enjoying real freedom. Hence, the state becomes a welfare state, ensuring minimum living standards, equality of opportunity, and social justice. T.H. Green, a key modern liberal, argued that the state should create the conditions under which every individual can be free. Thus, liberty and authority are not opposites. The state's power is justified when it enables individual self-development. 3. Features of positive liberalism. 1. Welfare state, state intervention to provide social security and reduce inequality. 2. Social and economic rights, right to work, education, and health are essential for liberty. 3. Democratic planning, state involvement in regulating economy for public welfare. 4. Equality of opportunity, real freedom requires equal access to resources and chances. 5. Moral and collective view of the individual. The individual is a social being whose growth depends on the well-being of others. 4. Example. Post-World War II democracies, such as Britain's Labour government, 1945, establishing the National Health Service, and India's socialist welfare policies, reflect positive liberalism. 4. Transition from negative to positive liberalism. The transformation was not abrupt but gradual. It was influenced by the Industrial Revolution and resulting social inequality, rise of socialism and labor movements, new understanding of the interdependence between freedom and equality, modern democratic ideals of social welfare and justice. Key thinkers. T.H. Green introduced moral and social dimensions of liberty. L.T. Hobhouse advocated welfare rights and social justice. John Dewey stressed education and democracy as conditions for liberty. John Rawls, later, developed the theory of justice as fairness, blending liberty with equality. Hence, modern liberalism emerged as a synthesis retaining individual freedom but grounding it in social responsibility. 2. The Indian Constitution as a liberal constitution. The Constitution of India, adopted in 1950, reflects the essence of modern, positive liberalism. It recognizes both individual liberty and social welfare, ensuring that freedom is real, not merely theoretical. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar described the Constitution as striving to achieve both political democracy and social democracy. 1. Protection of individual liberty, classical liberal features. The Constitution safeguards fundamental liberal values. 1. Rule of law, equality before the law, Article 14. 2. Fundamental rights, Part 3 guarantee. Freedom of speech, expression. Movement and association, Article 19. 3. Right to life and liberty, Article 21 expanded by judicial interpretation to include dignity, privacy, and livelihood. 4. Separation of powers between legislature, executive, and judiciary, ensuring limited government. 5. Independent judiciary, guardian of liberty through judicial review, Articles 32 and 226. These features embody negative liberalism, protecting individuals from state excesses. 2. Promotion of social welfare, positive liberal features. India's constitution goes beyond mere protection of rights. It actively mandates social and economic transformation through state action. I. Directive Principles of State Policy, Part 4. They reflect positive liberalism by directing the state to secure a welfare state, Article 38. Prevent concentration of wealth, Article 39. Provide right to work, education, and public assistance, Article 41. Ensure living wages and humane conditions, Article 42 to 43. Promote health and nutrition, Article 47. These directives convert liberty into socially meaningful freedom. 2. Fundamental duties, Part 4a. They remind citizens of their moral and civic responsibilities toward collective welfare, a reflection of positive liberalism's ethical dimension. 3. Democratic and participatory institutions. The Constitution establishes representative democracy, universal adult franchise, and decentralized governance, Panchayati Raj, ensuring that freedom is exercised through participation and self-governance. Example: the 73rd and 74th Amendments, 1992 to 93, operationalized local self-government, making democracy participatory and empowering. 4. Balancing individual liberty with social justice. The Indian model does not choose between liberty and equality, it reconciles them. Fundamental rights guarantee freedom, directive principles ensure social justice. Together, they create a balance between negative and positive liberty, reflecting a modern liberal welfare state. 5. Judicial interpretation and expansion of liberal values. The Supreme Court of India has expanded the meaning of liberty through progressive interpretation. Maneka Gandhi v. Union of India, 1978. Liberty under Article 21 includes fairness and due process. Olga Tellis v. Bombay Municipal Corporation, 1985. Right to livelihood is part of the right to life. Keswananda Bharti v. State of Kerala, 1973. Liberty and democracy are part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Thus, the judiciary has ensured that liberalism in India remains dynamic and evolving, not static. 6. Liberal secularism and religious freedom. The Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, Articles 25 to 28, but maintains state neutrality toward all faiths. This reflects liberal secularism, which neither suppresses religion nor privileges it, ensuring individual choice and social harmony. 7. Economic liberalization, contemporary perspective. Since the 1991 economic reforms, India has also adopted liberal economic policies, emphasizing private enterprise and globalization. However, This liberalization coexists with constitutional socialism. The state still bears responsibility for welfare and regulation. Hence, India represents a synthesis of political liberalism and economic pragmatism. 3. Summary for quick understanding: negative liberalism. Freedom from interference. Minimal state. Emphasis on individualism and laissez-faire. Founders: Locke, Smith, Mill, Early. Positive liberalism. Freedom through state action. Welfare and equality as conditions for liberty. State as enabler, not oppressor. Founders: T.H. Green, Hobhouse, Dewey, Rawls. Indian Constitution. Liberal in political structure, fundamental rights, rule of law. Positive in social vision, directive principles, welfare state. Balances liberty with equality, individualism with social justice. Thus, it represents modern liberalism in practice: freedom with responsibility, rights with duties, and democracy with equality. Quick revision notes: shift in liberalism. Negative. Freedom from interference. Minimal state. Positive. Freedom through social opportunity. Thinkers. Welfare state. Negative: Locke, Adam Smith. Positive: T.H. Green, Hobhouse, Dewey, Rawls. Indian Constitution as liberal. Part 3: Individual rights. Part 4: Welfare directives. Part 4a: Civic duties. Democracy, universal franchise and participation. Judiciary, guardian of liberty. One-line questions and answers for revision. 1. What does negative liberalism mean? Freedom from state interference. 2. Who are the main exponents of classical liberalism? Locke, Adam Smith, Herbert Spencer. 3. What is positive liberalism? Freedom through state action ensuring social welfare. 4. Who said, the state should create conditions under which every individual can be free? T.H. Green. 5. What is the role of the state in positive liberalism? Welfare, equality, and enabling real freedom. 6. Which part of the Indian Constitution embodies positive liberalism? Directive Principles of State Policy, Part 4. 7. Which part embodies negative liberalism? Fundamental Rights, Part 3. 8. What case expanded Article 21 to include due process? Maneka Gandhi v. Union of India, 1978. 9. What does Indian liberalism balance? Individual liberty with social justice. 10. What type of liberalism does the Indian Constitution represent? Democratic and welfare-oriented positive liberalism. Final connection. The shift from negative to positive liberalism marks the journey from the freedom of the privileged to the freedom of all. The Indian Constitution embodies this modern liberal spirit, combining individual liberty with social responsibility, rights with duties, and freedom with justice. It thus stands as a living testament to liberal democracy in its fullest sense, where the goal is not merely to be free from control, but to be free to live with dignity, equality, and opportunity.